So, whenever you think of My Little Pony friendship is magic, the first thing that may come to mind are likely the characters, specifically most likely the main cast of ponies. But aside from them, there's also all the side characters who appear slightly less frequently. And then after all them, there's of course none other than the background ponies. Let's talk about them. If you've ever been a part or really even just aware of the brony fandom, then you're probably quite familiar with the noticeable obsession the fandom has with a bunch of seemingly random, unimportant ponies from the show that almost exclusively only appear off in the background of episodes, completely separated from whatever the main 6 characters are up to. As a matter of fact, a certain number of background ponies are such prominent staples of the MLP fandom, they have, in a way, effectively become icons of the fandom that help represent My Little Pony fans, or bronies as a whole. So with that said, it's kinda a given that there's a lot of things to say about background ponies in general. From the select few of them which have gained some fame, both in and outside the fandom over the years, to the many different types of fan creations featuring them. And then after all that, I'll try to answer the question, why do people even care about background ponies so much? Well, before I answer that, I think we might as well take a few steps back and look at some of the more widely known, famous background ponies from the show, starting with none other than the pony most commonly referred to as Dopey, or alternatively, a few other names like Ditsy Doo and Muffins. I don't think I need to do a lot of introducing to her, as she easily is the most popular and widely regarded background pony from the show by a landslide. She's just the grey-colored Pegasus with typically crossed eyes, who likes to eat muffins, is usually depicted as being clumsy, and is nearly as recognizable as the main 6 ponies. She first appeared in the very first episode of MLP FIM in the background of this crowd shot, and only a few weeks after the show had premiered in 2010, some bronies inevitably took notice of her unique expression and promptly dubbed her Dopey, a name derived from the internet slang word dope. And the rest is pretty much history. Over the following years, she exploded in popularity in the fandom and effectively became the background pony from the show. There's enough stuff to say about her that I could probably fill an entire video, such as how the people working on the show noticed her popularity and basically made her into the MLP equivalent of Where's Waldo by putting her into hard-to-spot places for fans to look for. Or how in later seasons of FIM, she's frequently shown working for the post office delivering mail. But easily the most notable and kinda bizarre thing about Dopey was a certain controversy involving her, fittingly named Dopey-gate. I won't get into all the details here, but the gist is that during the beginning of the Season 2 MLP episode, The Last Roundup, she actually got a brief speaking role interacting with Rainbow Dash, wherein the name Dopey was also said out loud. As you may imagine, the brony fandom was absolutely floored with excitement and hype over the fact that all their love for this background pony was officially acknowledged in a big way by the people who created the show itself. However, to their dismay, Hasbro shortly afterwards decided to change both Dopey's appearance and voice in future reruns of the episode on TV, after some claims were made saying her portrayal in it was considered offensive. The brony fandom did not take this lightly, and a massive outcry demanding for the changes to be immediately reversed was started, with people starting hashtags like #SaveDopey. For me, the whole thing is honestly sorta amusing to look back on, just for how big it got. Like, people were making full-on serious animations about it and artwork of Hole being erased to protest the changes. Early 2010s bronies absolutely meant business when it came to dopey hooves. They weren't messing around, that's for sure. Although, with this said, while Dopey may be the most famous and recognizable background pony from the show, she by far definitely was not the only one to have an explosion in popularity of unexpected fans. May I introduce to you what's commonly called the Background Six, a handful of characters that are generally considered to be the most widely known and iconic background ponies from MLP G4. Other than Dopey, there's also Lyra Heartstrings, Bonbon / Sweetie Drops, Vinyl Scratch / DJ Pony, Octavia, and Dr. Hooves. I imagine a lot of you watching are probably familiar with these ponies too, as they're very much nearly on the same level of notoriety that Dopey is. In a similar way to her, people watching the show back in like 2010 and 2011 took notice of them and came up with characteristics or backstories they thought matched their designs. For instance, Vinyl Scratch was first seen operating a turntable while wearing headphones, so people associated her with being a record producer who made music like dubstep. The pony Dr. Hooves quite literally is just one big Easter egg to the BBC show Doctor Who, so naturally, a lot of people came up with explanations and headcanons about this pony version of the Doctor time traveling. And in one episode, as a small visual gag, Lyra was oddly depicted as sitting on a bench in a very human, non-pony-like fashion. This one-off gag then inspired a bunch of fairly popular memes and other fan creations involving Lyra being obsessed with the concept of humans and human history. My favorite example being this one MLP fan song called Anthropology, sung by Awkward Marina. And with that said, I think it's now a good time to talk more about these fan creations in general. Because after bronies first noticed and talked about any background pony, the next natural step was to of course begin making stuff of their own, featuring the pony in question. And they definitely did. It kinda goes without saying that the countless plethora of fan-made MLP animations, fan art, fan music, fan fictions, or other miscellaneous fan projects played a pivotal part in why a lot of background ponies became so beloved and popular in the first place. This is mainly because, back in the day, the MLP fandom was a bit unique in the sense that it was unusually, extremely socially connected for the time. Someone could create a headcanon or animation about a background pony, and there was just a chance their interpretation of the character could catch on and spread quite rapidly through the fandom, with their ideas also gradually being expanded on by other fans. This type of collective world building by bronies and MLP fans alike is ultimately how the background ponies we know and love got a lot of their iconic personality traits or quirks. As an example, people took a few seconds of Dopey being excited over muffins in the show and made it a trope of her personality that she loved eating them. Even to the point where one of her official alternative names is straight up just Muffins, and she's shown eating some in later seasons of the show. And while we're on the topic of headcanons and whatnot, I might as well also quickly mention the good old subject of shipping. I won't go into too much detail about it, but it was, and to a lesser extent still is, a trend to take tons of different background ponies and ship them together. Some of the most popular background pony ships involve characters like Dr. Hooves, but probably the most notable in my opinion is Lyra and Bonbon. These two ponies were for some reason very frequently shown together, so they became a fairly popular pairing in the fandom over the years. This all came to a head in 2019, when the ship was actually officially made canon in the last episode of the show. They can be seen proposing to each other, and a newspaper photo of their wedding can briefly be seen too. Ships like these rarely ever get made official, so it was a cool nod to the fans. That being said, another form of fan-made media I mentioned was also all the mini classic MLP fan animations that feature background ponies in some way. There's obviously tons of videos I could name, but to list a few, there are animations like Once Upon a Time in Canterlot and Guardian by Kenichi Panda, which features a few ponies beating up changelings. There's a Tropical Octavia animation, a pretty well-known one that has Octavia and Vinyl Scratch stranded on a beach, and Project Thundercloud 1 and 2 by Minty Root, which has all of the background 6 ponies in all their glory. There's a lot more I could list out, but these ones should give a good idea of the type of animations made about background ponies. A sorta lesser known, albeit still pretty interesting fan-made thing involving background ponies are the Tumblr Ask Blogs. For those who don't know, Ask Blogs are a genre of blogs on the website Tumblr that fan artists make to apply to user-submitted questions with unique art, all while role-playing as a character from a piece of media. In the case of My Little Pony Ask Blogs, this means stuff like Ask Applejack, Ask Philly Twilight Sparkle, and Ask Gamer Princess Luna, with countless other blogs featuring different ponies and entertaining gimmicks. MLP Ask blogs used to be extremely prevalent in the brony fandom throughout the early to mid-2010s, and they're honestly an entirely separate rabbit hole to go down, with rather infamous blogs such as Little Miss Rarity. But after people noticed the blogs for all the main characters in MLPG4 were starting to get a bit saturated, they of course began making ones for the background ponies. There were the standard Ask blogs for all the ponies you would expect, like Dopey Answers or Ask Octavia, but there were still some even more fun outliers, such as Ask Dr. Colgate, Let's Ask Berry Punch, and my personal favorite, Ask Mafia Octavia, which is set in an alternate universe where prohibition begins in Equestria and Octavia decides to stop playing music in favor of selling bootleg cider and joining the Pony Mafia. These blogs could get quite wacky sometimes, and I absolutely love it. Fan creations such as these Ask blogs, among other stuff like fan art and animations, really did help push certain background ponies directly into the spotlight of the My Little Pony brand in general. And Hasbro definitely made sure to capitalize on that unexpected popularity by selling merchandise catered more to bronies of background ponies like figures or miscellaneous clothing items. My personal favorite pieces of merch featuring them are these old official We Love Fine shirts with stuff like artwork of Vinyl Scratch and Dr. Hooves. They all give off very charming vibes, and basically scream of the early 2010s brony fandom. And on the topic of Hasbro officially acknowledging the MLP fandom's love for background characters, aside from selling merch of t-shirts with Dopey slapped onto them, background ponies were also given official recognition through other means too. Most notably with the Season 5, Episode 9 of MLP FIM, Slice of Life. I won't turn this into a detailed recap of the whole episode or anything, but all you need to know is that it's the episode where all the famous background/minor characters are now the primary focus, all while they have to deal with planning an impromptu wedding. I would say this episode is basically the culmination of about 5 years of the brony fandom being obsessed with these ponies, and the writers of the show choosing to effectively make a thank you letter to the fandom by featuring the ponies they took and sorta made into their own. Each of the background 6 ponies I mentioned earlier are shown here throughout the episode, like Dr. Hooves taking Dopey to his house and trying to explain a bunch of math and science stuff to her, or this scene where Bon Bon reveals to Lyra she's actually a secret agent. But probably the most iconic sequence here is the one with Octavia and Vinyl Scratch, where they play some electric cello dubstep music together, realize they're late for the wedding, transport a bunch of other ponies on a mobile DJ booth, and end up quite literally jumping the shark in a dramatic way. Other than that, the episode also has a fair share of stuff referencing memes or insider jokes from the MLP fandom, such as the sea serpent being officially given the fan-made name Steven Magnet that originated from an old, inaccurate, automatically generated YouTube caption. This one golden Twilight Sparkle staff from 2013 briefly appearing again as a reference to a bunch of Twilocane memes, and also this real-life photo of a few people who worked on the show wearing horse masks actually appearing in the episode itself for a few frames. So all in all, I would say Slice of Life was a pretty fun celebration of background ponies and a nice way of embracing the fans that made them popular. One of my personal favorite moments from it is near the very end when the main 6 literally get locked outside of the wedding by Dopey. It truly does symbolize the meaning of the episode. Although, with that said, something you may have noticed in Slice of Life is that most of the background characters predominantly featured here are essentially only the super well-known ones, like the background 6 ponies, in addition to a few others. This ties into the fact that all these popular background ponies, which the majority of MLP fans know about, are also our ones who first appeared in Season 1 of the show. Which, if you think about it, seems kinda odd, considering MLP FIM continued to gradually introduce new ones throughout all the later seasons. If you compare the background ponies seen in Season 1 to like Season 8, it becomes clear the designs definitely got a bit more complex and debatably even more creative in general as the show went on. Especially when you bear in mind these are ponies restricted to the background who don't have any notable speaking roles. So I guess that sorta begs the question, why are a certain handful of background characters from the early seasons generally far more well known than the ones which came after? Well, the answer to that is 2 things. Firstly, particular ponies like the background 6 were just at the right place at the right time. Back in the very early days of MLP G4, in like 2010 and 2011, there simply weren't a lot of background ponies to choose from in general, and ones like DJ Pondley, Dopey, or Octavia were simply among the most unique and memorable looking back in the day. So, the massive, quickly growing brony fandom latched onto them specifically hard, to the degree they have a lot of staying power. And secondly, to tie into the first point, after a while, the show, in a way, introduced too many background ponies for the fandom to care about. By the mid-2010s or so, the big community-wide hype train surrounding background ponies had more or less mellowed out to a smaller scale, and all the big ones I've mentioned in this video had been collectively solidified by fans as being the background ponies from MLP. After a while, there was just an abundance of new ones most people watching didn't really care about. not because they were bad, but more so because there was this already established group of a dozen or so recognizable ponies from the peak of the show's popularity that people were more attached to. Like this pony from season 9 in 2019 may have a cool looking design some people will notice, but they will never be as iconic in the eyes of fans at large as ponies like Dopey or maybe even Carrot Top. Which is sort of a shame, considering how the designs of them gradually evolved to be overall more detailed in the later seasons, with stuff like more fun color schemes, distinct hairstyles, or accessories that make them stand out. As a matter of fact, I would say some of the newer background ponies are so much more detailed that they straight up just look like pony OCs sometimes, due to how much effort must have gone into designing them. Take a look at these ponies, and don't tell me they don't sort of give off OC vibes. Well, actually, I just slightly lied to you. Because this one purple-colored pony over here actually is a confirmed OC background pony. This is Blue Peeler, the pony persona of Mike Vogel, a writer and producer who worked on MLP Friendship is Magic for several years. So with this revelation in mind, it kinda makes me wonder potentially how many OCs/pony personas of people who worked on the show are just hiding in plain sight. I guess we'll never know for sure, which is pretty funny. With that all said though, I think now is about time I finally try to answer the big question I imagine some of you may be wondering. Why are background ponies so popular in the first place? What exactly is the appeal of taking background characters, most of which don't even speak in the show, and investing so much time and effort into creating stuff about them? Well, I believe the answer to that ultimately boils down to the fact that we are given barely just enough info about them to begin to be intrigued, but they're also intentionally left as effectively blank slates in most other aspects, which naturally encourages us fans to get creative when filling in the blanks. Another big factor for their popularity is how a lot of them simply have designs, which really do stand out and feel unique. Background characters in most animated cartoons in general tend to be basically glorified moving props that are just put there to make a scene feel less empty. However, the background ponies in MLP FIM are a large breath of fresh air for numerous reasons. They all fundamentally feel and look a lot more individual, partly because each pony in the show's universe is supposed to have their own special cutie mark, symbolizing what they're passionate or talented at permanently slapped onto them. So, as a result, it's essentially a requirement for every background pony to have at least a slightly distinctive or eye-catching design from everybody else around them. The part of this that really draws in fans to take some creative liberties, though, is how it's possible to infer certain characteristics of background ponies through details of their design, like their cutie mark or maybe accessories they are wearing. But what exactly they do in their everyday life whenever they're not in the background of episodes is still almost always left up in the air. So, bronies watching the show inevitably took what scraps of canon information about them that were available and, as highlighted earlier, got super creative with it. And a big appeal for people creating things like fanfictions or headcanons was how, within reason, there wasn't inherently an incorrect way to interpret a background pony. Like I mentioned, the majority of background ponies are practically only 1 or 2 steps above from being blank canvases, so this gives fans more than enough room to relatively freely take them into a bunch of different directions creatively. And this also ties into part of the appeal for all the more well-known or old-school background ponies in particular. They initially started out as just any other ponies in the background of episodes, but through the imagination of the fandom, ponies like Vinyl Scratch, Dopey, or Octavia all became much more remarkable and famous MLP characters. In other words, these background ponies are so beloved because they, in a way, essentially belong to the fans. All the creative things the My Little Pony fandom make about them help flesh out and give more life to the world of MLPG4 as a whole, and I think that's pretty neat. But anyways, with the why have we been obsessed with these random ponies for over a decade question now hopefully at least somewhat sufficiently answered, I think that's mostly all I had to say. So, I think you should all totally go comment down below which background ponies from the show are your favorite ones, and why do you like them? For me personally, I have a bunch of random background ponies I like, but among my favorites are Fleetfoot, Jasmine Leaf, Tornado Bolt, aka the GOAT, and a certain MLP Comics exclusive pony who goes by several different nicknames, but for now, I'll just call her Swift Reply. Although, that being said, I think the phenomenon of background ponies is something that's just very fascinating to look back on in general. As I said earlier, a certain handful of them have effectively become representative or exemplary of bronies as a whole due to their very close association to the fan base itself, and I can totally understand why. Some of the most memorable pony animations, or even things like fan songs, tend to feature certain background ponies. So it isn't too surprising how they've become quite synonymous with the more creative side of the fandom, as they perfectly help illustrate the imagination of MLP fans, and how over the years we have turned them into much more than just background ponies. So, with this being said, thanks for watching. Well, you have now made it to the outro, so I hope you liked the video. If you did, then do all the normal stuff. Comment, like, or share it around, whatever you feel like doing. Anyways, though, I must say I definitely had fun doing all the background pony related research for this video with stuff like all the old Tumblr Ask blogs. I didn't mention every last detail about them, but I hopefully still at least included all the important stuff. Nevertheless though, I think that's all I have left to say for now. So, as always, I will see you whenever I see you.